In this video, I'm going to go over creating probably your first simulation in Insight Maker. The assumption is that you have at least a working knowledge of Insight Maker in terms of how to get around and navigate the environment. And you've decided that you've done enough relationship maps and you want to try simulation and find out what it's all about. So in this video, I'll go ahead and cover the basics of creating a simulation model within Insight Maker. So when you get to Insight Maker, tell it you want to create a new model, and remember that the first thing that you do when you get here is tell it to save it so that bad things don't happen. Your first simulation version 2, because there's one in there someplace from 8 months or so ago. So creating a basics simulation. Actually, 3 of them before we get done. So I don't need any of this stuff, so I'm just going to clear the model. From the primitive drop-down, you create simulation models with stocks, variables, converters, links, and flows, which are over here. So you can add a stock from here, or you can click over here and add it from the drop-down. Now, if you're going to create a simulation, the first thing that you want to think about is what's the time frame for the simulation? I mean, am I talking about the things that vary on the order of minutes, hours, days, weeks, months, years, centuries? And the reason that it's appropriate to figure that out is because that will give you a basis for figuring out which things are stocks and which things are variables. Stocks are things that accumulate over time during the period of the simulation. If you think about filling a bathtub with water, it usually takes a few minutes to fill a bathtub with water. So I could create this and I could call this bathtub. And now that initially the bathtub has got nothing in it, it's empty. And I then want to go ahead and show a flow of water into the bathtub. The only way that you can change a stock is with a flow. Now, when you draw flows, you click on the stock and draw outward. If you want it to flow into the stock, you have to click here and reverse it. It's just the nature of the web-based environment. And here, I'm going to go ahead and say that the flow is 1. Maybe it's 1 cup per minute or so. I don't know. At the moment, I don't care. So I have a stock called the bathtub, and I have a flow, which is 1 unit per time period. And up here, I'm going to say the time period is minutes, and I want the simulation to run for 20 minutes. So when I run the simulation, it shows that the value of the stock starts at 0 and it accumulates to 20 over a period of 20 years. Well, I don't think years was the right thing. I wanted to do this in minutes. Okay, so let me do it in minutes, which is sensible, okay, for a bathtub. This is probably the simplest simulation model that you can build that actually does something. It's 1 stock and 1 flow, and it simply accumulates something flowing into the bathtub over a period of time. If you were going to do a simulation of something in years, a bathtub would not be a stock, because a bathtub fills in a period of minutes. One thing that people typically get messed up on when they create their first simulation models is orders of magnitude. The things that you simulate in the model need to be on the same orders of magnitude, so that, I said a stock is something that increases or decreases over the period of the simulation. So it takes a few minutes to fill a bathtub with water. If you are going to simulate something on the order of years, filling a bathtub happens in an instant compared to the overall time period. So you need to understand the time period that you're going to do the simulation for, and that then gives you a sense of how to identify which things are stocks. And you want to identify them because you can only change them with flows, and it's the way you build the structure of the model. Now, if I think about, let me go ahead and create a savings account. All right, the savings account, and initially I put $50 in it. Then I want to have a flow into the savings account. So I draw the flow and I switch the direction. But the flow is really, now you can click on this and come over here and change the name of it and call it interest, or you could double click here and actually change it here. The same way with variables, you can click them and change them over, or elements of the model, you can change them over here, or you can double click and change them here. So interest adds to the savings account, but the interest depends upon the amount of money in the savings account and the interest rate. So let me go ahead and say that I now have something, well, let me move this out of the way. All right. I have something called interest rate. All right, and the interest rate is, in this day and age, if you could get 3%, you're lucky, probably. So it's 3%, 0.03. So what I want to do is I want to tell it that the interest is dependent upon the interest rate, but it's also dependent upon the money in the savings account. Now, this link is laying on top of the flow, so what I need to do is hold down the shift key and click on it to create a waypoint, and I can create multiple of those so that this is now separate. Now it's easier to see it. And I can now tell it that the interest is the amount of money in the savings account times the interest rate. And I want to run this over a period of years, and it's annual interest, so I accumulate it one time period. So when I now run this, I end up with too many things on the same one, and it's difficult to keep track of. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to add a display, and I'm going to call it savings account. It's a time series, and what I want to display is the savings account and the interest, and I'll apply that, and then I'll go back to the default display and I'll configure this, and I'll take the savings account off of it, and I'll take the interest rate off of it, and I'll just put the bathtub and the flow, and I'll call this bathtub. Okay. So now I have two different graphs here, two different displays, so that the stuff isn't running into each other. And I can now look and see that the savings account, which started at $50, increases over a period of 20 years all the way up to $90, because the interest rate's not very large. If the interest rate was much larger, suppose the interest rate was like 10%. There were days like that. Excuse me, once upon a time. If we now look at the savings account, notice how much more rapidly the amount of money in the savings account increases over time, and you can even see that the interest is getting larger period by period. So what this represents is a reinforcing structure where the flow is dependent upon the amount or the quantity of something in the stock. It's called positive feedback or reinforcing feedback. You could have reinforcing feedback causing something to grow or to decline, because you could have the rate at which something flows out of a stock dependent upon the amount that's in the stock, so that you could simply reverse this direction of this and do a simulation in the reverse direction. The third thing that I'll create, which is actually, well, this is reinforcing feedback. This is a simulation where the stock, the rate of change is dependent only on the flow. It has no dependence on the amount that's in the stock whatsoever. So the third one that I'll create, and let me just go ahead and cheat and select this, then hold down the control key and make a duplicate of this. And I'll just call this bathtub 2, and I'll call this flow 2 so that they're not confused. And here I'll create a variable called full, so that the tub is full when it gets to 50 gallons. All right, so now what I have to do is I have to tell the flow that when the tub is full, that it ought to stop. So what I then create is another variable, and I call it gap. And the gap is the difference between full and the current level in the bathtub, so that I just make this equal to full minus bathtub. And I use that to define the value of the flow. So rather than it being constant, it's the gap. And if I, let's see, start with the bathtub being empty, I go ahead and simulate this. But now I have another mess. I need to go ahead and add another display and call it bathtub 2. And here I want bathtub 2 and flow 2 and full and gap. Let's do that. And then I'll go back to my first display and configure this. See, what I should have done, I should have clicked this that says add newly created primitives to the data. I should have unclicked this so that it would not have added those variables to that graph on me. So now if I look at bathtub 2, it says that 50 is the goal, the full level, and in one time period it goes from 0 to 50, so that the bathtub fills in one time period, which is actually not true because the faucet doesn't allow that much water to flow. So what I now have to add is another variable and call it max rate, the max flow value for the faucet, and I'll call that I don't know, maybe the max flow rate is 5. That might be high, but that's all right. So now I tell it that I go over here and I find a general function and an if then else, and I say if the gap is greater than max rate, then the value is max rate, otherwise it's the value of the gap. So now if the gap is bigger than the maximum amount that I can get out of the faucet, I just use the max rate, otherwise I use whatever's left. So if I now run this simulation and look at the bathtub, notice that now the bathtub is filling in a linear manner because it's filling at 5 units each time period, and the flow is constant until it gets to here, and then it tapers off to 0 because the tub is full and it doesn't flow anymore. So what we have here is what's referred to as a balancing feedback loop, where the flow is dependent upon the difference between some current value and some desired value. So we have a feedback independent flow growth. We have a reinforcing growth structure, and we have a balancing structure. And those are the only three structures that exist in simulation models. It's some combination of those three over and over and over again, connected together and interacting. So that's an introduction to doing simulation in Insight Maker, and my advice to you is go create these three structures on your own and get a feel for them so that you get a sense of how they interact. And then you can go ahead and do other fancy things like taking full and coming over here and saying you want to create a slider for it, and the max value of full varies from 50 to 100, and the step size is 5, so that you now have a slider here that you can vary what full is and run the simulation with that value. And you can do that for initial values for stocks, for values for variables, and it allows you to readily change the values to see how the structure behaves. So that's an introduction to simulation in Insight Maker. If you want to continue a bit more in depth, from Systems Thinking World has a simulation with Insight Maker course, which covers the things that I talked about in much more depth, or you can take the Creating Insights with Insight Maker, which covers storytelling, simulation, and a whole bunch of other things, all you ever wanted to know about Insight Maker and then some. To find out where these courses are, just go to any browser and type in Systems Wiki, SYSTEMSWIKI. You don't even need a .org. Just type in Systems Wiki, and this page will come up at the top of the list, and you can just click on it. So hope you found this informative. This model, your first simulation version 2, is in Insight Maker. You can go and access it and look at it and interact with it if you want to. Though, as I said, I would encourage you to go to Insight Maker and build these three models and play with them. So I'll see you in another video soon. Bye.